Hello and welcome to the Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette, as ever, talking all things Manchester United. We are sandwiched between a win at Sheffield United and a fixture with FC Copenhagen in the Champions League. You may be listening to this episode after that match has been played. But Rob, how are you feeling? How are you going?
Not bad at all. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? When we do our show and we just end up between fixtures, it's hard to kind of aim our content, isn't it? Because we're kind of talking about the recent past and the very near future and where Man United sits. So we'll try and do our best today to give our audience something around those lines about what we're thinking about going on at Manchester United.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of, United won the other day, but obviously getting outplayed for periods by one of the worst teams in the Premier League is cause for concern. And that did happen. So we'll try and dig into the reasons why that's happening throughout the bulk of the show today. But subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube, the Promised Land and Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Hit the notification bell as well so you never miss a show. And follow us on social media at @Scott Saunders on X, IG, and TikTok, at _Rob_B on X and YouTube, and at Promise and MU on X as well. But Rob, we do have to start the show with over the weekend, awful news. Obviously, we lost Sir Bobby Charlton. I'd imagine tonight, I'm going to be going to the game tonight, that United will pay tribute at Old Trafford. I think the Premier League in general did a good job of paying tribute over the weekend as well. And at Tottenham last night, they actually did something too. Really somber weekend, Rob. One of the greatest.
Completely. But I think as everyone realises, especially when someone passes away, Bobby Charlton was probably the greatest English footballer that ever lived. And think about what he did during that period, both with 10 years after the Munich air disaster, winning what is the Champions League, but of course the European Cup back in the day, winning the World Cup in 1966 with England, winning what is now the Ballon d'Or, the European Footballer of the Year trophy back in the day. Just incredible achievements. One of only 5 players to do that treble clean sweep for a footballer in European football. Just so sad, Scott. Just like I remember when Matt Busby passed away, and it's like a pillar, a column of Old Trafford just disappearing, just something that you're so used to being connected to and seeing every day of the week. And then, people die, and it hits you really hard there, and you see this collective outpouring, not just from Manchester United fans, from the whole football community. And that's where Bobby was so respected, was that it's like universal. There's not any person that has a bad word against him at all, whether against his career or his morals. Everyone's got a story as a kid. I've got one where you met Bobby Charlton and you were like,
What's
Sorry?
What's yours?
Mine was, it was my birthday. I did put this on Twitter the other day, so if you want to read about it, go and see it. And I put some photos there. But it was arranged that I met the team when I was about 10 or 11 at Selsdon Park Hotel in Croydon. United were playing away against Charlton Athletic. And we managed to, somehow my mum organised for me to meet the team. It's a bit easier in those days than it is today. Let's put it that way. So we turned up at the team hotel and met various players, like Norman Whiteside was in the foyer with Paul McGrath and chatted with them, and Brian Robson came down, and it was all brilliant. And then Alex Ferguson just appeared, and chatted to us for like 15 minutes. It was really amazing. And then Bobby Charlton just walked down the stairs in his club suit and kind of ushered us over to him. And we just talked to him. And he remember saying to me, because I was wearing a United tracksuit, I remember him saying, "Oh, I think you've nicked my tracksuit, young man. That's my tracksuit. I've got one of those right upstairs now. I'm going to be wearing that, later on." And I was like, and again, I grew up with Bobby Charlton being this kind of godhead. Had never seen him play, of course, because I was too young. But, he's my mum's hero. And we had photos with him. And that's what I posted on Twitter. And it was an incredible moment. You never forget it. Like, that just stays in you. Like, they're in my earliest days as a Man United fan. Like, maybe you had 3 years I've supported the club. So that was that rollover period. And things like that convince you, because it's like, this guy won the World Cup, you know, and I watched that World Cup game over and over again as a child. So yeah, those are the things that you remember, you know, and everyone's got that story of going to his soccer school. Like everyone I've spoken to is like, oh, I went to Bobby Charlton soccer school like David Beckham did. David Beckham's story, of course.
David Beckham, I think, is one of his middle names is Robert, I think.
It is after Bobby Charlton because his dad's such a big United fan. So, you know, again, in the 80s and the 90s, his soccer school was like the biggest thing for kids. So like if you could go to the soccer school, it was everything, you know, you could go there and play and you got to meet the biggest legend of the football club in a time when Manchester United were absolutely awful. So we're not particularly great now, but when you've lost one of those heroes and one of those veterans of the football club, someone who's always there, director, someone who's always in the stands, it's heartbreaking. As I said, it reminds me of when Sir Matt died. Just so sad, Scott. And one thing I did say on Twitter is I'm so happy that we got to celebrate him while he was alive. Like he's got his stand named at Old Trafford. He knew how much he meant to us. You know, he was. I remember being also at the Champions League final in Moscow, and I bumped into him outside in the stadium outside, and it was again one of those moments where he's just walking around, and people are like, "Oh, it's Bobby Charlton," you know, and he's just wandering around talking to fans before the biggest game of a lot of our lives, you know what I mean? And he kind of calmed everyone down. He was just like, yeah, all right, take a photo. Yeah, I know, it's a big game this, you know, this is where we should be. And it felt good, you know, and it's Bobby Charlton who's saying that to these fans and just mixing with the fans outside. So an incredible man. He'll always be remembered. His statue's outside Old Trafford. It will be there for eternity. And just very, very sad. But at the same time, Scott, just happy that he was a part of our lives and that we were a part of his.
Yeah, obviously the numbers speak for themselves. He was a brilliant ambassador for United after his retirement, but the numbers speak for themselves. You know, winning the European Cup after 10 years after Munich. I think he was 20. He was 20, wasn't he, in the Munich air disaster? Coming through and rebuilding and being the spearhead of the rebuild of United with, Best and Law, etc., and going on to make as many appearances as he did. And he had the goal scoring record for United as well, just up until I think it was 2015 when Wayne Rooney broke it.
Yeah.
So that's
for England.
And for England as well. And I think Wayne Rooney broke that as well. But when you think nowadays of like the ball he played with, the pitches he played on, he played in midfield. And nowadays as well, there are more matches for these players to play in to break those records. So I think Harry Kane's now England's top goal scorer, but he's since surpassed Wayne Rooney's record. But he scored like 25 penalties for England. You know, England play 10 qualifiers against Malta and San Marino and all these kinds of teams. So obviously you're going to inflate the numbers there. But Sir Bobby was the records were unbelievable. And really somber weekend. But like you say, Rob, what a player, what a person, and hopefully we'll at Old Trafford tonight. The tributes will be completely apt, and I'm sure they will be. The players have come out and signed a book of condolence as well over the last few days, and the tributes will be worthy, I think, because Sir Bobby was just a giant.
Of course, the players come and go, Scott, at your football club, but then there are like the ultimate servants, the ones that have been there, done it, and remained. And I think that's the whole thing with Bobby Charlton, because even though he left the football club when he retired, he soon came back and has been part of the football club for a long time. Obviously had a stint in management that didn't work for him, and he decided it wasn't his route or how he was going to live the rest of his life. But just epitomised everything about Man United. He absolutely bled the football club, and just it's always again like the kind of figurehead, just someone that you're going to always look towards. That's the standard. So when we talk about Manchester United, we should talk about the terms of the great players that carried the football club going back, and Bobby Charlton's certainly one of them.
Yeah, sending love to Sir Bobby Charlton's loved ones. A big loss for football, big loss for Manchester United, big loss for everyone. Sir Bobby Charlton. Really sad, really, really sad. But you mentioned there, Rob, about standards, and Sir Bobby held that, took United up to the highest standards. He was one of the main figureheads in United setting the standards, and he was there helping Sir Alex along after he took over as well. You know, they became really close in this kind of thing. And what United have had over the last, well, since 58, 68, is these standards that are set right up here. And obviously, they went 26 years without winning a title until Sir Alex Ferguson turned it around. And obviously now we've had 10 years of falling down from the standard. Erik ten Hag is the man in charge of bringing them back, and he talks about them a lot. Sheffield United did win on the day that we lost Sir Bobby, which was a fitting tribute. But obviously the lack of style and the lack of identity in United is being questioned by fans at the moment. And, you know, you can't really go into a game currently and think, right, we're definitely going to win that, you know, because we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. It's all a bit of a lottery at the moment. And why is it, Rob? Because I'm seeing now a lot of people are starting to be frustrated that it's been nearly 18 months for Erik ten Hag, and they don't really have a discernible style of play. Tottenham turn up on Monday night against Fulham, and you know they have a style under Ange Postecoglou. You look at Pochettino's Chelsea, and then they're beneath United in the table. But you can probably say that you know what they're trying to do. Did you know what United were trying to do last season? And do you know what United are trying to do this season?
Style and substance are interesting things because, again, they're all matter of opinion. But I do think what you're saying is completely correct. There is a collective feeling with Man United fans now about, well, what are we expecting every week? What are these players tasked to do? Why are these players not doing certain things? We've said on this show, we'll keep banging the drum. United have had a lot of injuries, and that's hampered their start to the season. You're somehow only 6 points off the top of the table after the worst start you could possibly have. But there are worrying things, Scott, that we're seeing repetitively, especially, I think, from the senior players. And I always leave it at their door because they're the players on the pitch that Ten Hag relies upon to get the message across, to be able to set standards. You know, we've just been talking about Bobby Charlton. And Bobby Charlton obviously set the standard through that period, all the way through United winning, you know, the league title and winning the European Cup in '68. But obviously, when he retired in the early 70s and in that period into the mid 70s, Man United got relegated. Why? Because they didn't have the style and substance anymore. It disappeared. And, you know, I think older United fans will tell you great stories about that period in the 70s in the second division for that 1 year where they travelled everywhere and hammered everyone and got back up to the first division. But Man United are playing teams like Sheffield United, no offence to Sheffield United, that they should be dealing with in a much more relaxed, salient, controlled manner.
Well, Newcastle beat them 8-0.
Newcastle beat them 8-0. And with Newcastle beating them 8-0, Scott, again, not just the scoreline, but it's the method. And you could see the control that Newcastle had over the result. Unfortunately, with Man United at the moment, we do not see that for whatever reason. Like, we can bring up 100 reasons here and do a 3-hour show. We're not going to do that, guys. We're not going to bore you with that, but we'll look at the main points. But United are doing repetitively the wrong things. There are things that you watch and you think, why is it taking you 60 minutes to get going? It really shouldn't take you 60 minutes to start doing your work. It should take you 10, 15. There was no doubt in that Sheffield United game, Scott, that it felt a little bit like the Brentford game the couple of weeks before. Now, don't forget we've had an international break in the middle, so 2 weeks. And I think Ten Hag said afterwards that the international break hampers the way players play because they're with their international teams and it's different and they come back. Why does that not hamper other teams?
Well, Jurgen Klopp said at the weekend as well.
Yeah, I think it's a common trope that managers put out there after the international break that we didn't play well because of the international break. But then you kind of look at it and you kind of say, well, some of your players are rested. Some of your players are ready to go. Surely you've still been working with them at the training ground. So these guys don't know how to press again because they've been on international duty. It's rubbish, Scott. It is rubbish. It's just not real. So it's difficult because we back Ten Hag and there's no doubt about it. And you haven't really got a lot of choice, but you just mentioned Tottenham there. And Postecoglou's walked into that football club and said, you've got to do this, 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 and this, and that's it, whoever you are. And guess what? They do it and they look good. So Ten Hag's got 18 months with these players. And I don't know why the style and substance isn't there.
Do you think that Ten Hag did have that buy-in? Because
think-
we can pair Postecoglou in after 8 games in the Premier League, 9 games in the Premier League. This time last year, I know Ten Hag lost his first 2 games, but he was getting a lot of credit in the middle of last season for turning the attitude around.
Yeah.
And it was reflecting on the pitch. So obviously, because this is now in vogue, you know, and Postecoglou's managed to do it straight away. Ten Hag did change things, and he did get a reaction out of players after the defeat of Brentford. It just didn't last that long. So what's changed?
There was that period last year where for 20 to 25 games, maybe 30 games, that United had Eriksen pop in. Eriksen was in the form of his life in the central midfield. People always forget it now, but he was playing brilliantly deeper. And Casemiro came good. So Casemiro had that spell where he looked like the best defensive midfielder in the world again. And it made United solid. And United were obviously integrating new players, weren't they, at the same time? You know, you got a brand new centre-back. So you've got a centre-back pair in there. You've still got David De Gea in goal. There are other things happening. Now, that was good. But we all admit that they kind of ran out of juice at the end of the season. So they won the League Cup, Scott, and then the form disappeared. Yeah, so that's the truth. That's how it worked. That form has never really returned. That style that they had before in terms of being controlled and having a press never really returned. Now, we still talk about the press here every week because it's modern football. It's what all the top teams do. I'm going to use one example just very, very quickly. Here, last night, obviously, Spurs won. And they interviewed James Maddison, and Maddison's linked really well with Son at the top. And they've said, like, you know, what's this manager getting you doing? And he said these words. He was like, you know, if we don't press, he said, we get hammered. He went, we get hammered in the dressing room, and this manager says it's non-negotiable. If you don't press, you don't play. Now, we know Ten Hag says something similar, doesn't he, in press conferences? So why are we not seeing it? Why are we talking about certain players just playing isolation football on their own half the time, where they want to run at players or do what they want to do? It's difficult, Scott. I think there is a collective issue still there. Like this team still doesn't feel like a team after 18 months. So that is worrying to me. And I look at the senior players and I wonder why the senior players still kind of think that they know better than the manager in terms of what style or substance means.
So this is what I wanted to come on to. Like, let's say Postecoglou came into United at the start of this season. Does he get the exact same results with this group of players versus the group of players that Tottenham have?
Maybe. Like, maybe not. Like, again, I think this is where the individual comes down to it. And I think that all managers have their principles, don't they, and their philosophies and what they want to put on their players. And that they try and do that from day one, from the first training session to work through it. I think Ten Hag is a pragmatist like that. And Ten Hag wants United to end up being some version of 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, where they are possession and they play on the counter press. But they are just so fragmented at it, Scott, in terms of what they do with the ball at their feet, the decisions they make, the times they press. They've got a brand new striker now, Scott, and they're not using him properly. Like, that's the truth. And we can say that's because of injuries. But this is the senior players at the club who are on the big money, who have got this young lad up top who is running like a dog. Like, I think he's doing the miles, and they're not sliding him in. They're not really crossing the ball for him. They're not getting wide.
They did it once against Sheffield United.
Once.
Was a second off a tap in, yeah.
Once is not enough. Like, they should be feeding this boy until his belly is full. Yeah, that's how they should be working. You know, you look at Tottenham, let's use them as the example, and Spurs know that if they get the ball to Son in and around the box, they might score more likely than someone else. You know, that's how it works. So they've moved him into a centre-forward position, and it works quite well, doesn't it? That's one of the reasons why Spurs are being successful. They've worked out that Harry Kane's gone out the door, so we have to make sure we do some number 9 play for someone. And you know what? Son's our best finisher. Let's stick him there. You've got a forward at Man United now, a striker. And it's quite interesting, Scott, because I see it also when Martial comes on the pitch, that they don't really use him properly either. Like, it goes a little bit more slower and static, and they try and get the ball to his feet. He kind of drop into the pocket. They try and link up play. But it's old. It's like old money. It's not new. It's nothing fresh. It's kind of like going through the motions. So the manager has to sort it out. There's no doubt about it. You'll get your players back in the weeks ahead through injury. But I'm not quite sure that Luke Shaw or Aaron Wan-Bissaka or even Casemiro's obviously had a knock now. Do these players take you onto another level? Have you got stuff on the bench that you can bring on? Well, I think Garnacho's helped United when he's come onto the pitch. At times, I think Eriksen really helped United with the ball at his feet. but we know Eriksen gets run. We know Eriksen hasn't got the legs to do some of that midfield work. I really like what Amrabat's doing. I think he can help you push on. I really do. And then it's what you do with some of the kids like Hannibal and Manu. But they are the same questions, aren't they? It's the same things we're talking about. How do you make your style and substance go from here to there? So we know that there's an expectation, Scott, every week. And I'm not seeing it as a fan. Like, I'll say that bluntly because I want to see it. I expect to see it, but then I also expect to see the same rubbish sometimes. I go there and I think, why are we seeing this against Sheffield United? And then I remind myself that I've seen it every week for quite a long time. So that's the problem, I think, Scott. And especially when you mentioned Chelsea there with Pochettino, brand new project. I think you look at Liverpool, with what they've done with their midfield with Klopp. And all of these clubs have kind of gone from here to there very quickly in their style again because they have direction. That's on the manager. The manager has to make that work.
Like, so I don't want to, I'm getting a lot of stick for defending the manager, right? The difference here, right? Liverpool were awful last season. Their midfield was the problem.
Yeah.
They shipped out their entire midfield.
Yeah.
Chelsea shipped out tons of players. So when Erik ten Hag says, I would like to sell Scott McTominay, and the club say no, and Erik ten Hag says, and we'll talk about Harry Maguire in a positive sense today, when Harry Maguire is up for sale and Erik ten Hag effectively says, right, he's up for sale, let's get some money from Harry Maguire to reinvest, and the club don't do it, is that Erik ten Hag's fault? Because for me, clearing out the players that he doesn't want is something that Liverpool have done and Chelsea have done. And you look at the profile of the Tottenham midfield, which we both agree is the real problem in United's. United can't keep the ball. Scott McTominay was lauded. I know he gave the penalty away, but he scored again. He scored two in injury time the other week. 8 completed passes.
His stats were terrible
in that game. 8 completed passes. How are you meant to play build up with a player that barely touches the ball? Like, you can't.
No.
You look at Pap Sarr, right? 20 years old, come out of nowhere. Bissouma, when at Brighton, was one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. He had a write-off season last season, but one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. They are the two, really, that you look at with this Tottenham midfield that make them function. Then you've got James Maddison in front of them with a bit of creative. But Pap Sarr and Bissouma can do everything.
Yeah.
They can. United have players like Eriksen who can only do the one thing, pass the ball. He gets overrun because his physical isn't there. Casemiro can't really, we know that he's on the verge of a decline. That's why we talk about Kobe, who's been injured. So
Hannibal,
I think
all of them,
Hannibal, this is the thing. Ten Hag is picking these players, and yes, he should probably take some stick for continuing to pick these players. But at the same time, I feel like some people are getting into a position here, and maybe we disagree on this. We're getting into a position where we're looking at the manager again, saying, it's your fault. And then let's see, I think we play Liverpool in mid-December. We play Man City this weekend. Let's say we're still 8th, 10th in mid-December and Liverpool smash us at Anfield. Oh, the manager's gone again. Let's go get De Zerbi. Yeah. What changes? Honestly, tell me, what is going to change? I would much prefer give Ten Hag a free pass for now, and let's just stick with it until we fix this problem of all these players who are not what we've let managers down in the past. They've let Mourinho down, they've let Solskjaer down, they potentially letting Ten Hag down as well because they're not doing what he wants. You can throw in. Well, we'll talk about Bruno Fernandes in a minute. I don't question his desire at the moment, but he does not pass the ball properly. And we spent 18 months talking about that on this podcast. He doesn't pass the ball. It's hot potato all the time. You can't tell me that Ten Hag is saying hot potato. Let's just loft it in the air. He's not. So this is the thing. Until the sporting director comes in, until the ownership changes, this kind of thing, until Ten Hag gets actually support from above in terms of what he wants, instead of picking every single player because he knows them. That's not how a club should run.
No.
I'm just thinking, grin and bear it, because you bring in De Zerbi, you're going to have the same problem in 18 months' time.
Look, I'm totally with you with grin and bear it. And I think that's where you are with Man United. There's the political stuff with Manchester United and the recruitment issues. And then you get to the manager. Now, there's no doubt, I think when we compare maybe Ten Hag with other managers, other football clubs, Ten Hag does have to operate with one hand behind his back. Like, we know this. Like I said, weeks ago how difficult it must be to have to build your season around players that you've told you don't want. You've told these players that they are gone and that they won't play for you ever again. And now you're in a scenario where you're having to play them. Harry Maguire had played, and I thought he played very well against Sheffield United against his former club. He helped us win a football match. That's great. That's good professionalism. Scott McTominay scored you a goal, but can't pass the football. Well, that's great that he scored you a goal. Not great that he couldn't get his arm out of the way for the penalty, but that's life. But passing the ball 7 times and through a spell of a football match is not good enough. So Ten Hag has to work with that.
Rob.
Was it 8 times? I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I was 7% off there. But the whole thing with it, with Ten Hag, is that he has kind of got these golden handcuffs on, and he has to operate through that. But you use the word free pass. I'm not giving him a free pass on tactics, technique, and kind of the repetitive nature of certain things in games that you have to see. I'm not. In the same way that I wasn't giving it to Klopp last year when we were looking at Liverpool and analysing Liverpool and going, your midfield's rubbish, mate. And he fixed it. So you can say that Liverpool supported Klopp in that decision-making, didn't they? And that Manchester United have not supported Ten Hag in maybe some of his bigger decision-making, what he needs. I'm sure he would have loved to have sold Harry Maguire and bought Kim Min-jae. We've said that 50 times on this show. Once you've got those players there, Scott, and that's all you've got on a match day, you have to find a way to make it work. And the issue isn't Harry Maguire. The issue is Bruno Fernandes. The issue is Marcus Rashford. This is the issue. The players that are not going anywhere, they are going to be in the team no matter what. They earn the big dollars. They've got the big contract. The expectation is on their shoulders. So I blame them collectively, tactically and technically, with the manager. I think the manager, after 18 months, has to get a song that at least sounds in tune, Scott. If he's the conductor of the band, if the oboe player is not playing the right notes, you've got to go sort that oboe player out. And I don't see that. And I think that's what I find worrying. But I'm with you. I think you have to just wait and see, let it play out. It is miraculous that you are somehow 6 points off the top when you've played so badly. We're very early in the season. But you're also at a tipping point, aren't you? Because that 6 points can very quickly become 12, very quickly. And then you're done. Really, you're not talking about Champions League qualification anymore. You're talking about Europa or below. And I think that he's tap dancing on a kind of very dodgy ground at the moment. These players have got to do more. In the top 10 of the division, Scott, Man United are the only team with a negative goal difference, -2. Everyone else is a positive. Yeah, we've had injuries, and injuries affect your form. But as you said, some of these players we're talking about 18 months ago, we're saying exactly the same thing about them, like identical. So he should have got different things out of them, I think, in that time period.
Well, this is the thing for me. I mean, I understand completely, and I'm not saying at all that Ten Hag is faultless here, but all I want to get across really, and maybe we differ on this, Rob. I don't see the point of going down the let's get rid of this guy. He doesn't have a clue what he's doing route, because this we have seen at Ajax. This is not the football that Ten Hag plays. We have seen it. And yes, there might be some differences here, but the problem is that let's say this ownership thing that doesn't change and the sporting directors, but even that, if Paul Mitchell comes in, that's going to take 3 years really for us to see something effective come out of that. And you've got to get through that. Yeah. But until that change happens and you have a different ownership structure in there and a different football structure, what is the point of casting off another manager? Let's see him through. Let's get him through to that point where we can start planning properly with a new football structure ahead of him. You're gonna have to strap in here. This is not gonna be fixed overnight. Be patient. It's not. I know it's awful in terms of the football that United are playing at the moment. There's some bad defeats that United have had, and it's a real grind watching United at the moment. But the answer here is not to back the players again. For me, we've seen it too many times. The players have won every single time in the last few years, and for me, I'm just going to sit here and just digest it. to be honest.
Look, no, I completely agree with you in principle. I'm certainly not saying sack the manager. You're not at that point. What I'm saying is I totally understand fans' frustration
Yeah,
when we talk
so
about
do I. So do I.
style
Yeah.
and substance. Like beating Sheffield United is great. Playing well for 20 minutes and winning a game is all right, acceptable because you get the 3 points, but you could have lost that game in the same way you could have lost the previous game. So if we'd lost against Brentford, lost against Sheffield United, would you and me be now doing a different kind of show? Probably. So I think that these margins are too fine for me. And this is where I want to see more. Like we also talk about things like the back rooms, Scott, and how things are. Like, so you've got a former England manager there as an assistant coach, yeah, and you've got a kind of strong, robust setup. And yet when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was there, we constantly talked about Carrick and McKenna and kind of their lack of quality. And now what are those two guys doing? They're in the Championship looking really good as managers, aren't they, as leaders? So this is the whole thing, is that there was a lot of stick for that backroom going back in time. And yet we've got a backroom now that I kind of look at them and I kind of go, well, what are they doing? Like what is, if we're supposed to counter press, why are we not counter pressing? Like why does it look like everyone is in jog mode, or everyone's just kind of making decisions for themselves in the first instance of play? Now that must drive the manager mad. It must absolutely drive him mad on the touchline. But he has got, between Monday and Friday every week, Scott, to pretty much sort it out. Like that's how they have to work and find a philosophy that works. Philosophy is not important, Scott, but performances do get you victories. So you've got to find a way to becoming better. And this squad just seems to like you just said there about backing the players. I don't think it's about backing players, backing managers or anything. It's holistic. It's everyone. Yeah. And that's why I do talk about certain players and say, you might have to drop them. Doesn't matter how big their reputations are, what their stats are telling you. You might have to bring in some kids to bring the energy levels up, to say, right, we know you're going to work
They don't
hard.
do the basics, Rob. They don't do the basics. But the fact of the matter is, and I know Ten Hag's made this decision to make Bruno captain, so you can't really drop the captain. You also have Marcus Rashford.
Why can't you drop him?
Because you've seen the amount of fallout from Jadon Sancho. And this is the thing. Like, when Pep Guardiola drops Jack Grealish and nobody bats an eyelid.
No.
He cost 100 million. Nobody bats an eyelid. They've spent 50 million on Calvin Phillips.
Yeah.
Can't get a game.
Yeah.
That's not... I know Pep's winning, so he's earned that trust. But, all I'm saying is, if Erik ten Hag did drop Bruno Fernandes because he was not doing what he asked, the blowback... Tell you a difference, right? The Onana foul against Wolves in the first week of the season.
Yep.
There was a week worth of this is an absolute disgrace. Why was this decision not made? They came out and said, yeah, that's going to be a penalty. What happened in Chelsea Arsenal? Robert Sanchez clattered Gabby Jesus in the exact same manner. I'm not yet a word. I'm yet a word.
Yeah.
The difference is that Erik ten Hag is having, and every manager that United has, is having to deal with that. It's magnified by 1,000. And that's where the pressure comes from. So that's the difference,
If you can't stand the heat, Scott, get out the kitchen. Sorry, this is life at Manchester United. Yeah, you drop a penny there, everyone thinks you dropped a pound. So you have to be bomb-proof with your decisions at the end of the day, mate. I think that's the way it is. I think, I don't look at this. Ultimately, there's two ways of looking at this. There's Man United, the entity, which, as you said, is in the news every single day of the week. We're doing a Man United show here. It is the biggest thing in the world when it comes to football. But when you're picking 11 players to play in your football team to win a football match, that is the only priority. And if you get it wrong, yeah, there's going to be tons of blowback. But if you win, there isn't. So, if you drop Bruno Fernandes and people see that your midfield is tons better, no one's going to say things, Scott. But yeah, if you get it wrong, you play a kid and you lose a game 5-0, you're going to get shot for it. It's just the way it goes. So we can't escape that from Manchester United. It's the same at Real Madrid. It's the same at Barcelona. You have 10 minutes of bad luck or bad form and the world crows about it. We are that football club. No one cares about Chelsea and Robert Sanchez. That's why, Scott. That's a difference. Yeah, people care about what Man United do. That is a thing. But this manager has to be brave with it. I think with Ten Hag, part of the problem for him is that he's a conservative and that he does run with it. I saw, again, a talking head saying that you had to run with a midfield of Casemiro, Amrabat and Bruno. And you know what? That's what he'll do because that's the conservative choice. But if we're watching the same conservatism every week get you nowhere, maybe you have to change it a little bit. So I think that this is where you can say to the manager, it is on him. Yeah, decisions will be questioned in the press and across the board on social media. You make one bad choice or one even iffy choice, you're going to get it, aren't you? Tough. That's why you're at Man United. It's the big questions, the hard questions you have to answer, and you have to live or die by them. That's it. And I think when you look back, Scott, in time, Van Gaal made the same mistake, yeah? Just got more and more monotonous until he got sacked. Mourinho did the same thing, got more and more monotonous until he got sacked. Ole ran out of completely ideas, didn't have a clue, hit a brick wall. His two young lads went to championship clubs, have done really well, and you get sacked. I don't want that for Ten Hag. But I do think that Ten Hag has to be maybe a little bit braver with some of these decisions. Like, he has to. He's got a squad of 20-odd players, Scott. Use them. I keep saying this. And live and die by that. Live and die by what you're telling these lads to do. Because he's coming into pressures now, Scott, and he's waffling, basically. Oh, I wish they'd done this. I wish we'd played better. Don't wish it, make it happen. You know, if you can't make it happen, guess what, Scott? You get criticised. So I'm with you. Don't sack the manager. Give him time to figure this out. I rate Ten Hag highly. I really do. But at the same time, the team isn't doing stuff. If you're not counter-pressing when you've told the world you want to be the best counter-pressing team in the world, why? There has to be that question. And it doesn't matter, Scott, the world blows up on it. Who cares? Like, it's Man United. This is what happens. You happened to Fergie. You know, Fergie made one choice, you lost 1-0. He'd get so much criticism. And even that was when we were winning titles. So I just see it for what that is. And I think it's football at the end of the day. Man United and at Carrington, the players are in a bubble. They don't really care what's going on the front page of a newspaper in that moment. That does build pressure, of course. But their jobs are to be good footballers. And, you know, you just talked about Bruno Fernandes there. I'm now getting people messaging me going, oh, I see what you said about Bruno 6 months ago. And it's not that I'm digging Bruno out. It's just that he needs to pass the ball better, Scott. Like, it's just basics. Put it on the deck. There's no point talking about Scott McTominay. He's not going to be at the club much longer, is he? He's going to go eventually. But we want Bruno to stay here. He's the captain. So these players, Marcus Rashford, they must play better for their manager. Otherwise, what, Scott? Drop them. That's what I say. Drop them. And sitting on a bench for a week, nothing more powerful to a player than knowing that message of you will not play. Happened to Harry Maguire. He lost his place in the team, never got back in. But it's fashionable to attack Maguire, isn't it? But it's not fashionable to attack maybe, say, Bruno or Marcus. I don't want to say attack. That's not a good word to use. Anthony gets it all the time, isn't it? He's on that cusp of do you play him, do you not play him? If he doesn't do what you want him to do, Scott, don't play him. Put him on the bench. Bring him as an impact sub off. You win as a squad, you lose as a squad.
Let us know what you think. My point that I'm trying to get across here is it's not always. I think I don't disagree. The manager needs to do more. I think he needs to be bolder. I agree with that. Don't fall into the trap is what I'm trying to say of, oh, this manager's useless.
He's not useless.
That is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
This manager, like you say, handcuffs behind his back. Look at the wider context for me. This is going to take some time. And just because you see in other managers, you know, the pressure is different. It's different. But
it is different. It
is different. The magnifying glass is a lot bigger. And yes, Ten Hag is not completely blameless, but I'm getting a lot of. I did some tweets over the weekend, and I was getting a bit of. It seems like I'm on my own trying to say this at the moment. So
it's a big hug, Scott.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just everybody looks at the manager. Yeah, and obviously I do other shows as well, and everybody's like, Ten Hag said this, Ten Hag did this, and I'm like, you don't get it. I'm sorry, you just don't get it.
Style, quality, substance, performances are his remit. He has to find ways. And it's good that you're winning games now, Scott, in the last couple of games where you've not played well. That is a positive sign. It really is. Beating Sheffield United when you were horrible in that first half again is a really good sign. I think he's playing on that, Ten Hag, in his presses. He's kind of saying that, like, oh, we're figuring out on the fly. I understand that. You know, we'll talk about some other players as well now towards the back of the show. And it's like, again, I think you've brought in Maguire, and we said last week, maybe this is the time to reintegrate Harry Maguire. Like, things are not working with other players. We've talked about the centre-backs and what's going on at the back. Maybe it's time to bring Harry Maguire back in to play a different style of football and to let him run those areas. I don't know, Scott, what do you think? Because I think he's played well in the 2 or 3 games he's played for us, played all right for England. You haven't got a lot of choices. Like, you really haven't. You've got to find a way to get blood out of a stone.
I think Maguire's reacted quite well.
Yeah,
And I think
shown
maybe
character.
that is a measuring stick or like a proof, an evidence, a body of evidence there for what we're talking about
Mm,
of how this guy is out of the team and now he's coming back in. He's doing the basics of what he needs to do, and he got player of the match the other day.
yeah,
I think there were other players maybe in contention for that, but I think credit to Harry Maguire for every single piece of. He's had so much criticism because of how much money he cost. Because of how much money he costs, by the way. Talk about adding pressure to a player. Like you
yeah,
might say that it doesn't make a difference. He's probably aware he cost 80 million quid, you know? And every single mistake that guy made was clipped up and put on social media. I'm sure he doesn't go on it, but you must know that it's there.
yeah.
When you're that person. The way he's reacted and responded is really encouraging.
Mm,
So I feel like, and what you're saying there Rob, about if a player isn't doing it, drop him. Bruno Fernandes.
has to be that
If
way.
Marcus Rashford isn't doing it, drop him. And Maguire's had an extended period out of the team, and now he's come back in through, Varane's been injured, Martinez is injured, so he's getting his chance. But I think he's now, we said at the start of the season, or maybe you didn't, but Victor Lindelof was maybe ahead of him in the pecking order. He's now back ahead of Victor Lindelof in the pecking order for
I
me.
think
Like,
so.
yeah, maybe even like, with Varane as well. I'm not going to say he's better than Varane, but, Varane isn't always going to be there. So you're going to have to get used to it.
And do you know what, Scott? There is a scenario here. Like the season's young, isn't it? There's a lot of season left to go. If you take the Wan-Bissaka example of someone who was about to be shown the door and was told he was about to show the door, and you play games, you play your way back into form, you play your way back into favour, and then before you know it, you're getting offered a new contract. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Harry Maguire, but I don't look at the situation as completely dire. Like I'd have liked Maguire to leave the football club and you'd have got some money for him and bought a new centre-back. That's the kind of normal, the revolution of football. It's kind of just the way it goes. You move in that direction. But I'm not kind of blind enough to think that Maguire played games and actually played well, that you're not getting to the end of the campaign and going, well, Maguire's now my first choice right side centre back because Varane gets injured every week. And we wait, Martinez is back and Martinez has played well. And like you just said about Victor Lindelof, Lindelof was ahead of Maguire last year. I watch Lindelof and I just shudder every week.
I know you don't. I know you're not a big fan of Lindelof.
It just does the same wrong things all the time, and yet he's one of those players I think that does get a pass from a lot of players because people go he's limited. It's a big, Delot scored that great goal, obviously for us, but his wider work was poor, and people are saying, "Oh, isn't he played well?" And I'm like, well, it was a great goal, and when he inverted, he was really good. But when he was defending in the fullback position, it's the same stuff that we've seen forever. So you've got to figure that out as a manager. And I think that's the problem, is that these players have limitations, but you've got to work with it somehow. And I think with someone like Harry Maguire, there are still qualities in Maguire's game that you can use to help your team. It just means you might have to play a little bit different, Scott. I don't know how you can rely on Varane at all this season. It's really difficult because he gets injured every 2 or 3 weeks. Talk about Casemiro. How do you rely on a player now that gets run past by pretty much every central midfield that he plays against? These things are huge questions, and the only person that can answer them is Erik ten Hag. We can't ask the Glazers, we can't ask Jim Ratcliffe, we can't ask anyone upstairs. You have to just ask the manager because it's his job to find those solutions. You just said there about Maguire and the weight that he's had to operate on. I think that's real for individuals, for a player, Scott, is that, if you're the most expensive defender of all time, 80 million, you're going to get that kind of pressure on top of you. But you come to Man United because you want that pressure. You want to prove yourself. And he's had to deal with so many things, like really unfairly, about his reputation and who he is. That's life at our football club with that badge on your chest. You have to grin it and bear it and fight your way through it. And yeah, credit to Maguire actually showing that he's got the fortitude to step up to the plate when he was needed.
United play Copenhagen on Tuesday and then the derby this weekend. We'll talk about that on Friday's show. I think we'll be back on Friday. But until then, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment for us as well. I mean, I get it. We both get it. Ten Hag is not blameless. He has to do more, obviously. But I feel like just over the last few days, we're moving towards that point again where it's like,
I'm with you. And just one last thing to end it with, yeah. I want to say this: is Tottenham's squad better than Man United squad?
You asking me, or
yes? Pound for pound, added together as a big equation.
No.
So there's your answer. So, like, the thing is, Man United's squad is good enough, even with injuries, to still be playing a better style of football. And I think that is the problem for fans overall. And that's why I think Ten Hag has to take a portion of the cake and scoff it in his mouth and eat it, because that's up to him. And that's why Postecoglou, like in 20 games time, Scott, we might be saying something completely different about Spurs. They might be awful. And we might be going, well, they're not running now. And what's happened? Because that's what happens. They're human beings. But Spurs' squad is not better than Man United squad. So we need to be seeing something on parity when they're playing a very similar style of football in the press. So press means run. Marcus.
This is always something that I firmly believed. United's contracts, and I'm not like Tottenham's players do not earn as much money as Man United's players.
And they're hungry.
And that affects hunger. It does. And that's a big thing. That ain't Ten Hag. I'm sorry. That's not Ten Hag's fault. It's not Ten Hag's fault. And he has to get a tune out of these expensive, like, United have been doing that for 10 years. 10 years. Look at Liverpool's contracts. They are incentivized heavily. Maybe Mo Salah aside now because he's earned it. Yeah. But the reason why those players make, or are able to, are more incentivized to put that effort in is because they have to work for it. Whereas United hand it to them. Sometimes undeservedly. And do you know what, Scott? If the manager decided that those players on the big contracts were not cutting it for him, not running, not pressing, not doing the stuff, not passing the ball 5 yards correctly, and he drops them, I'll be the first one backing him. I'll be the one on Twitter saying and writing, saying, you got to stick with this manager's decisions. But if he makes the same choices and you see no difference, and then we're talking about Spurs being better and Spurs have got a worse squad, or we get weeks into the season, say we get to Christmas and we're talking about the same thing, I won't be surprised if we are, Scott. And we're talking at Christmas about style and substance. That can be affected on training ground. It can be affected by a manager. That's just where the manager is at the moment. And he's got to find a way to playing better football and winning more football matches. You do that, Scott, this all goes away very quickly. Yes, indeed. It's a vicious cycle, Rob.
It is.
It's a vicious cycle.
That's our football club. We are that. We're soap opera, aren't we? And it's difficult but football is fundamentally simple. Yeah. If you want to press, hey, Marcus, go and press. If you want to retain the ball, hey, Bruno, don't give the ball away frivolously. I'm sure the manager must be saying that to them. If he's not saying that to them, then you should drop them. If they're not doing it, I don't care what they're on, 200, 300, 400 grand a week. Drop them, and I bet you sitting on the bench has a positive effect on them. They might have to watch a kid play their role in the team. And if the kid plays well, guess what? You stay on the bench. Football's simple like that. But I also understand.
Do you know though? It's like that. This is a cycle, like we say. We're going on and on here. I missed a meeting. Never mind. But let's say Ten Hag drops Bruno Fernandes and plays Dangor, right?
Yeah.
Let's say he does that.
Yeah.
Dangor's not as good as Bruno Fernandes. So let's say
might be on the day,
but he might not be, and you might lose. So Ten Hag would take that gamble with a worse player who's inexperienced and lose.
Yeah.
Undermining himself.
Yeah.
I saw yesterday Bruno Fernandes, Rafa Varane went out for lunch with David De Gea. The guy that he, said, "No, we're not giving you a contract." And Andre Onana's in goal. Bit crisis of confidence, making mistakes. Oh no, let's just go out for lunch and put on social media with,
it's a bad
with
look,
our old mate.
It's a bad look.
Can imagine Ten Hag was endorsing that,
And this is why the manager has to be braver, because if these players are not doing it for whatever reason, like you just said there, what have you picked Dangor because he's not as good as Bruno Fernandes? Well, on the day, he might be better than Bruno Fernandes. He's not better on FIFA when you look at the ratings, of course not. But that's not real football. That's not organic football. Is that a Dangor might come in and give you supreme midfield control, and we all go, well, we found something here. A bit like Hannibal. People were like, Hannibal's not good enough. I think we did a show, Scott, earlier on. I remember you saying to me, this is not digging you out, Scott, but I remember you saying some of these kids are not good enough that they should play. That's why they're going to championship clubs and below.
Charlie Savage is Charlie Savage.
Good example. Good example. He's gone, isn't he? And I would have had Charlie Savage. I'd have played Zidane in our team at some point. But you look at Hannibal, and Hannibal's come in, and within 2 or 3 games, people are talking about him like he's a viable Man United footballer. Whereas before those 3 games, people were like, no. So I think you have to give it a go sometimes if your stars are not performing. This is why I look at Marcus. And if Marcus is out of form, drop him. If Bruno's out of form, drop him. It's not the end of the world. You're not telling these players they're not loved or not wanted. You have to be stronger with them. It's leadership, I see it as. So, like you just said there, Bruno going and having lunch with David De Gea is going to cause more of a storm than being dropped. People are going to look at that on Instagram and go, oh, aren't they? Bruno Fernandes knows that. Drop him. Don't worry about it. Drop him and make it a football choice. And then you'll be protected. If you lose games, then you live and die by that. That's just the way it goes. You just said that don't support the footballers over the manager, Scott. Well, then you have to drop the players. You can't drop the manager.
I can only imagine, though, what you're asking for, Ten Hag, if that doesn't work, it's a fast track to a sacking. It is, because you lose the rest of the players. So you're right. I think I'm right as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real answer here.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they got to win matches.
Yeah.
And the players have to do what the manager's asking. Yes, you can drop them if you want. Yes, you can play the young players. There's no guarantee that the young players, just because they try harder, are any better. I'm sorry.
There's no guarantee.
There is no guarantee. Right. And that is a fast track to a sacking.
There's no guarantee, but what is guaranteed at the moment, Scott, is that your top players are playing like garbage and they're not supporting your system or your philosophy. So what do you do? Catch-22, of course, you want to play your best players, but at any other football club outside of Manchester United, if your best players do not play well, they get dropped. It's just the truth. That's football. Real Madrid, you might be the best player. If you don't play well, the manager drops you. So that's where you are. That's how it has to be. If you have to play kids at times, playing Dan Gore for an hour and then giving Bruno on for 30 minutes, I bet you get 30 minutes of prime Bruno. I bet Bruno comes on and wins you the game. That works. It's about winning football matches. So, I don't know. I'm with a manager being brave in those decisions, but I agree with you as well. Man United would use that as an excuse to sack him. But then again, if you lose with your top players as well, he'll get sacked for that anyway. So, because they'll go with Bruno and Marcus. They'll say, oh, these are our top earners. And then they will go with the manager. We'll be having a show again about Man United sticking with players. So if you can't do what you want to do, change what you got with what you've got. That's just the way it is. Play the Hannibals, play the Gores, play the Manus. Maybe you have a decent midfield then, Scott. We'll be talking about something completely different. Competition is a really good drug in a football team. Yeah, get some competition within these teams, these players, so they know that if they play badly, they don't play. I like it that Marcus has been substituted a few times. That's something we've not seen, isn't it? Yeah. So Marcus getting pulled after 60, 70, 80 minutes. Good. Pull him if he's not doing what you want him to do, and don't feel bad about it. We support the manager in that. I certainly support the manager in dropping players and playing the teams that win you football matches, whatever that team looks like. I don't care if it's not the shirt sellers. Who cares?
They have to win. They have to win tonight. And
they have to.
They have to win tonight against Copenhagen, and they could really do with winning in the derby at the weekend. But We'll see. We'll be back on Friday because that is it for us today. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, hit the notification bell. This has been we've been going around in circles for 30 minutes. Sorry, everyone. But let us know.
Tell us what you think.
Tell us what you think, because I feel like they just have to win games, really. And Ten Hag knows that. I think he knows that better than anyone.
Yeah.
And he's doing what he can at the moment. For me, I think no manager can end up succeeding here, and you probably agree with this, until the club sort themselves out. And Definitely. What we're seeing on the pitch is a result of that. And every manager that's come before Ten Hag has fallen into this trap.
November's the
month.
month.
How many times can we do this, guys?
November's the month that clubs like to sack managers. November. We're not far off November. So he has to make sure that they're at least winning games, Scott. And the best way to win games is to play well. So That's the formula, really, and it doesn't matter how many players you got injured. That's a nice get out of card free jail. Well, to say Monopoly wise,
Jail free,
jail free card. He's got that in his pocket. But I do think that fans are valid when they're saying, why do we not see more style and substance? Because I think that's the bare minimum that we expect on a weekly basis.
Yes, indeed. I agree as well. I see the frustration.
And I support Ten Hag.
And
I really do. Don't sack him, please.
Yeah. All right. We'll wrap it there. Follow us on social media at @_ Saunders on IG, X, and TikTok @_Rob_B and @PromiseandMU as well on X. And that's it, everyone. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment for us, and we'll see you soon. Be back on Friday to preview the Manchester derby, and maybe we'll be talking about Man United being out of the Champions League. We'll see.
Fingers crossed for tonight.
Fingers crossed. See you, everyone. Thanks for listening. Leave a comment as well. Get in touch with us. Thank you.